Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and it's been a few weeks since we did an Apple News update, so I thought we'd talk about the latest as there's been a bunch of news about things such as iOS 19, Apple Intelligence, iPhone batteries, and much more. This is your weekly Apple News update for the week of July 1st, 2024. Now, Apple this week released a new white paper talking about how they're planning to sort of extend some of their services to third-party displays and batteries. One thing Apple said in their white paper is that they typically disable True Tone on third-party displays as it requires calibration. However, they'll allow the activation of the feature as best they can with third-party displays later this year. This will also carry across to the battery, where typically when you replace the battery, it doesn't show your battery health because sometimes it needs to know more information about the battery, and it looks like Apple's going to do its best to sort of enable this, but just let you know that it may not be 100% accurate on third-party batteries as they may not have all of the information. So it's great to see them adding more additional options for third-party repairs, and I can't wait to see how well this works. Apple today has classified the original HomePod, iPhone X, and original AirPods as a vintage product. If we go to their website, you'll see here that they have TV and home products, vintage worldwide, HomePod first generation, AirPods first generation, and then they also list the iPhone X. I'll link this in the description as well if you want to check it out for yourself. It shows everything from Macs to iPods and everything else that are now considered vintage. Now that Apple allows for third-party app stores and sideloading in the EU, Epic Games has actually finally submitted their own app store so you can play games such as Fortnite. You'll see that they posted on X or Twitter that they've submitted the Epic Games Store and Fortnite to Apple for their required notarization process. So they're waiting for that to actually get approved, and once they do, those games will be available in the EU. Hopefully Apple brings this option to everywhere around the world. I know Japan may get it soon, so hopefully we'll see that more and more. Of course, you don't have to install any of those, but at least they have the option for it. Now, when it comes to Apple's ID, when you're using digital IDs, many people wonder why their state or country isn't available. This is because Apple has to actually have the state work directly with them, and the state has to reach out, or the country has to reach out to get that approved. If we go into the Wallet app, you'll see there's currently 4 states in the United States: Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, and Maryland. However, it seems that there's about 20 more states that are working on this to get this set up. They have to work directly with Apple, set up their own equipment, and get all of the approval processes in place so that they actually can implement this. So you'll see the list here on 9to5Mac with Alabama, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Mississippi, New York, New Jersey, North Carolina, and some others as well. So we could see more of these actually come to the Apple Wallet app with a digital ID, but again, they have to work directly with Apple to get this implemented. So it could be a while as these things typically move pretty slowly. Whether or not we'll see other countries this year, though, is hard to say. Now, a few AAA games have actually been released for iPhone in the past. We've seen that here with Resident Evil Village and things such as Assassin's Creed, but it seems interest in games like this on iPhone are much lower. According to app figures, the games are commercial failures as far as sales go. And while I personally prefer to play on a larger display or video game console or PC, the games don't seem to be huge sellers there either. Typically they do pretty well, but they're not incredibly huge sellers compared to maybe other games that are on there, such as Call of Duty or Fortnite or The Finals or something else. So maybe it's because these are just games that we don't care about as much as those other games, or just people don't want to play on the smaller displays or pay the higher price of these games. Let me know what you think about these AAA games in the comments below. Now, we've all been waiting for Apple Intelligence. It's not yet available in the betas, at least at the time of this video, and Apple has actually said that it will be delayed in the EU. However, this is something that's actually sparked quite a bit of concern in the EU itself, where they've said this is a stunning open declaration of anti-competitive behavior. So maybe the EU will force Apple to implement those specific features based on laws, or just work with them to get them implemented as fast as possible. So this is good news and bad news, as I would love to see them implement the features in more devices and across maybe all of the world, but they do have to work around many of the different regulations in those specific areas. So we'll have to wait and see what they do with that, but it looks like they're being investigated for this. Mark Gurman this week also said that Apple Intelligence will be free to start, but Apple has a long-term plan to add features that would be more subscription-based, like iCloud Plus. So on your iPhone, if you go into your account at the top, We have our subscriptions. This is iOS 18, so it looks a little different, but it says subscriber iCloud. If you're subscribed to iCloud Plus, you get additional features with more storage. However, this may be the same sort of model Apple plans to implement with Apple Intelligence. So we'll have to see if they do that, but it should at least be free at first. And Apple's actually been working on Apple Intelligence for some time, but recently it was discovered that iOS 16.4 may have been the first version that had mentions of Apple's new cloud computing portion to Apple Intelligence. According to 9to5Mac, there's code referencing the unknown features, and it's possible Apple was testing some parts of the code right in front of us, like they've done in the past, and we didn't even know it. They did similar things with APFS before they released it. They actually installed it on your device, then removed it and put the original back on, all without us knowing, just so they could test it out. So they definitely could be doing something like this. And when it comes to Apple Intelligence, while we're still waiting for Apple to implement this, at least in the betas, Apple Intelligence is working a little bit right now with page summaries in iOS 18. This is a longer article in Medium, and you can see here when you have maybe a summary, there's a little icon here. Tap on it and you'll see a summary of it. Then you can listen to it or show the reader. So some of this is working already. Let me know if it's working on maybe older devices with this specific feature, as this is not technically part of Apple Intelligence, but it's sort of one of the features it will do. So let me know if it's working on older devices for you. And finally, when it comes to Apple Intelligence, Apple's planning to bring Apple Intelligence to Vision Pro, but not the HomePods, it seems, according to Mark Gurman this week in his Power On newsletter. This isn't really a surprise given the current Apple Intelligence requirements, but it's a little bit disappointing, as I know many people would like a more intelligent Siri on HomePods itself, but the overall processors may not be able to handle it on device. Now, many are wondering when the next beta version and public beta version of iOS 18 will actually be released, and iOS 18 Beta 3 is probably going to be released sometime next week. So let's switch over to dark mode here. Probably sometime next week, whether that's Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, we'll see that, and then maybe a public beta later in that week. That's sort of what Apple did last year when they had Beta 3 and then they released the public beta shortly after that. As they got things more sort of settled, more stable, that makes a lot of sense. We still have quite a few bugs, so it makes sense to push it another week, and then we'll see it then. However, this week I would expect iOS 17.6 Beta 2 since it's been a couple weeks. So maybe tomorrow or Wednesday we'll see that, and that should include just some small changes here and there. Now, when it comes to weekly deals this week, there's quite a few, and Apple Watch Ultra 3 and Apple Watch SE are actually discounted a little bit. AirPods Pro 2 are down to $199, sold directly by Apple on Amazon, and there's quite a few others with MacBooks, iPads, and more. I'll link all of those in the description if you want to check them out. Now let's talk about the latest rumors and leaks. And the first one is iOS 19. Apple's always working on the next version of products and software, and they get a head start on the future versions and timeline of its upcoming software. And according to Mark Gurman, Apple's already begun work on iOS 19. iOS 19 has a code name called Luck, and Apple's also working on macOS 16, codenamed Cheer, watchOS 12, codenamed Nepali, and visionOS 3, codenamed Discovery. And while it's likely we won't hear any rumors of what's in the upcoming operating systems for about a half a year or longer, Apple is still always working on the next versions of its software and products. So what actually is encompassing in this version called Luck, we don't know, but hopefully it's more stability and just a better experience in battery life overall. I would expect something along those lines, since iOS 18 was a pretty big visual overhaul with icons and more. But let me know what you'd like to see other than split view, as I know that's probably the #1 thing most people want. Now, iPhone 16 is actually said to adopt a new style battery when it comes to the overall casing and manufacture of it. According to Ming-Chi Kuo, it looks like it's going to have a metal casing, which should help for maybe higher energy density, up to 10% more. So in the same size, you could have a higher energy density, it'd be safer being encased in metal, and maybe help with heat dissipation as well. The new battery case will also allow for easier ways to replace the iPhone battery according to the information. So meaning you could just maybe pop the back off, unscrew a few screws, and disconnect it. Instead of having adhesive, you could maybe get it out of the overall chassis a little bit easier. According to ET News in South Korea, the iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max will actually use Samsung's latest OLED panel called M14. It allows for even more brightness and a longer lifespan. So that's great news, having the latest technology and maybe being much more bright when you're using it outdoors. Hopefully it will handle that heat as well a little bit better. Now, the next version of Apple Watch is called Apple Watch X or Apple Watch 10. We don't really know. but it's said to actually have a slightly different design. Some people have said it has a different band design, but according to 91 Mobiles, they leaked a CAD rendered based on what they've actually seen as far as what it looks like. The display is apparently 2 inches in overall size, so larger than the Apple Watch Ultra, but the watch size itself is smaller than the Ultra, but larger than the Series 9. So we could see some sort of a redesign with Apple Watch X or Apple Watch 10. Hopefully we'll see some changes, but I would still like to be able to use the same bands that many of us have collected over the years. Ming-Chi Kuo this week said Apple is working on new AirPods with infrared cameras in them to help improve spatial experiences with Apple Vision Pro. So what that means specifically, we don't know. Maybe it would be able to sense depth a little bit better when you're trying to sense something in a room. We don't really know what that means, but it could have infrared cameras on it to maybe help with overall spatial awareness and much more. But I know when I use Vision Pro, I typically use it with AirPods Pro, so it makes a lot of sense to incorporate them there if you need additional sensors. Now, Apple is always working on the next version of Mac, and it looks like they're going to incorporate an OLED panel similar to what we have with the iPad Pro this year. This week, LG, who supplies the OLED panels to Apple, has begun production on the first 13-inch tandem OLED for laptops. So seeing this brought over from the iPad to the Mac makes a lot of sense. They typically do things like that every year, where we'll bring the newest technology to iPads, trickle it down to the iPhone and Mac. I'm not sure why they always push it to the iPad first, but having the brightness in this OLED is really great with the super deep blacks and hopefully 120 Hertz display or maybe even faster. And then Vision Pro this week had some news where it looks like Apple has actually stopped production on, or at least work on, the next Vision Pro to focus on a cheaper version instead. Apparently it will cut costs by using a lower resolution display with bigger displays for maybe a better field of view. Some have even suggested it could tether to an iPhone to use that for processing power. So we don't really know what Apple's working on 100% with that, but it looks like Apple Vision Pro 2 will be released much later than originally expected, so they can focus on a cheaper version. I think they really should focus on getting games and different apps, as using it as a spatial computer or VR with computer panels seems to work fine, but it's not something people want to do all day long. But if it was $500 and it was super useful, then maybe they'd want to wear it more. But let me know what you think of that in the comments below. So that's everything for the news this week. Lots of news about Apple Intelligence. Hopefully we get to demo that in just a week or two when the next version comes out. And then also lots of information about the next version of iOS, iPhone 16, and more. Let me know what you're looking most forward to in the comments below, and I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do. If you haven't subscribed already though, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.